Welcome everybody. This session is for everybody. We've got a lot of EDI Health Check customers coming today, so this session is geared to help you answer section 1.1 of your EDI Health Check data, which is all about the key indicator, which is organizational pride. For anyone interested in finding out more about our EDI Health Check, you can find a link in the chat. The purpose is for absolutely everybody, and the information that Rebecca's going to be giving today will be totally interesting whether or not you're an EDI data customer. But this whole new series is all about bringing our customers closer to our amazing collective. So powered by diversity is our name, but it's also our mission and everything we stand for. So our whole ethos is that we are powered by the diversity of our amazing collective, and we want to bring you closer to them as our customers. So this is what we're aiming to do. So without further ado, Rebecca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kat. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about purpose, which I'm hugely passionate about. To give some context, I've worked in social impact communications for over 22 years now. I worked in government, central government here in London for 8 years early on in my career, working across a variety of different departments and portfolios. I was part of the communications team that worked on the UK government's first official response to climate change, which feels very strange that was only happening in 2008. And since then, I've worked in different parts of the world. And the current thread of my work, as I said, is very much around social impact, things that matter to people and planet. And I set up my consultancy, Beautiful Soup, back in 2012.
We did 3 years of research on our EDI framework, and one of the things that really surprised me was how completely that organizational purpose and pride in a job well done laddered up into organizational pride. So I am proud to work at this organization. Can you tell us a little bit more about how organizational pride and purpose beyond profit relate to each other?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that we're hearing more about impact and purpose. And one of the key reasons is that there's been a huge shift in mindset, not only in the workforce, but also across society. So, Kat, you and I have been speaking about kind of Gen Z and millennials and how they differ to perhaps older workers within teams. And those groups are more purpose-driven and socially conscious as a whole. Sustainability, we're finding, and studies back this up, sustainability is key for them around their work choices, who they choose to work for and with, and also their purchasing choices. And then this is also being kind of bolstered by all of our joint collective experience of the pandemic. We've all kind of taken that opportunity to reassess the balance in our life. And what we're starting to see now is we're keen to figure out ways that work fits into our life rather than the other way around. So we're starting to hear more about moving away from that work-life balance and actually taking more of a holistic approach. You know, that's why things like hybrid working and flexibility have become so key for a lot of people, because we're taking that more holistic approach, as I said, to our lives, rather than kind of having this, I work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and the hours outside of that are mine to do whatever I wish with. It is much more of a blend and flexibility, and also recognizing how different people work in different ways. I know we're going to talk about neurodiversity a bit later on, but you know, regardless, it could be that some people work really well at 5 a.m. in the morning, and doesn't necessarily fit into this 9 to 5 structure. So all to say, when we think about things that go beyond profit, you know, purpose is really at the heart now of what's important to businesses, to their talent, and to their clients and customers. And it feels like it's a very important moment in time when we think about that through the lens of the future of work. You might have seen there's been a couple of recent articles in the likes of Fast Company and Forbes, and it's all over social media as well, around the quiet quitting, which we heard a bit more earlier in the year, and lazy girl jobs is trending at the minute. And what this really means is people are looking for jobs with healthy boundaries. I think there might be a misunderstanding around lazy girl job means that I don't actually want to do any work. It's not that at all. It's not that people aren't ambitious, they don't care about what they do. It's just they recognize that the companies, as I said before, they work for, the work that they're putting out into the work, and their day-to-day lives, it all needs to, work appropriately for them. Does it work for me? And we're in a time where people have got the space and the ability and the agency to actually raise those questions and have those conversations with their places of work. So yeah, there's lots to kind of drill into there, but I personally think it's a really exciting time.
So purpose is often bandied around, and especially in relation to Gen Z. So you have to be a purposeful organization in order to appeal to this new wave of talent coming through. What actually is purpose?
I mean, the simple definition that makes sense to me is the reason that businesses exist beyond making a profit. So when we think about sustainability, I think the climate conversation has kind of hijacked that phrase. We often think sustainability equals environment, but actually sustainability is people, planet, and profit. The three of those things need to exist together. And so purpose through a work context is very much around the impact, the positive impact that you are having on your workforce, on your client customer base, on your wider community, on the world through the business that you are doing. There are some businesses where impact is at the very core of what they do. Maybe you're a circular fashion brand or you're working in renewables. But then there are other businesses, say you're a fintech company that's delivering software to the banking industry. Your purpose might not be as obvious, but it might be that you are being purposeful in the way that you care for your staff and you prioritize corporate, well-being, for example. And so the definition for me is the reason you exist beyond profit and the positive impact being that key phrase that you have on the world on a micro and a macro level.
That's a brilliant summary. I love that. Okay, let's talk about profit and purpose. And you just put those two together. I think a lot of organizations, especially ones who have existed for lots and lots of years, and they originally existed to do a thing and to pay their staff, to get the profits, to satisfy the shareholders and whatnot. That profit was always at the forefront historically, maybe not for everybody, but for a great number of businesses. I feel like there's a mental shift in terms of, can I be profitable and also purposeful? Are those not mutually exclusive for me? Can you be one without the other? So in this financial climate, especially where it often feels like the hamster wheel of, oh my gosh, we've got to keep our margins up. We've got to sort our cash flow first, heads, down. In this financial climate, can we afford to be purposeful?
Yeah, we spoke about this before and you asked me that question. Can businesses afford to be purposeful? And my response was, can they afford not to be purposeful? This goes back to everything I've just been saying. The sands are shifting, the tide is turned. And there's kind of this moment of all eyes on you for businesses and business leaders. So when we think about kind of affordability, if we're saying that predominantly the workforce is now looking to be engaging in purposeful work with businesses that have a clear purpose agenda, then one of the major things we need to think about is recruitment and retention. We're seeing that a lot of people are no longer money motivated in the way they have been in the past. They're looking to find meaning from the work that they're doing. They're looking to come back to your pride point. They're looking to be able to, when they're telling their friends and family who they work for, being proud about those companies and why they're proud. And that's got to be more than, well, because I earn X or because that company's had X amount of revenue. So we really want to be focusing on ways that kind of can create and sustain that double bottom line that we have talked about before, Kat, of purpose and profit. And I really believe when we're building sustainable businesses, as we all want to be and should be doing, we should be looking at those three things, the intersection of people, planet, and profit working together.
I also get the perception that, just on what you were saying, that sometimes when people think about purpose, just like when they think about EDI, they have this existential view of purpose. So we have to exist to change the world, to solve gender imbalance, to bring about, an anti-racist world, to level up these huge, their minds go cloudy, and nebulous, and they can't bring it back to actually what can we do. So but you can be purposeful in small ways, can't you? It doesn't have to be, we're going to change the world and that's why we exist.
Absolutely. And it's on an individual basis. It's like, what is within your gift as a business leader or a manager to support your staff or your wider community? I saw something a little, it's not a meme so much, but something that's doing the rounds on social media around a business owner who had hired a new person. They were talking about the hours that this person would be working, knowing that person was a mother with young children. And the essence of the email was basically saying, I know it, I get it. We're working and living in really crazy times. Childcare is nuts in terms of accessibility and affordability, but I've hired you because of your expertise. I trust you to do the job. We'll figure it out, like we're going to do it together, and I don't expect you to kind of be working over school pickup time, for example. So that's a really small example, but would have meant and means everything to that individual employee. And so I think we're talking about smaller things that we can do. It is kind of taking a look at, what do my staff need, like asking them, being in dialogue, and it's going to vary. And sometimes I think, particularly for bigger organizations, it can be hard to kind of make these decisions because they need to fit into an overall policy. But to that, I would say increasing, it's always been important. I know you know this through your work, Kat, but more and more you've got to be having a regular dialogue with the people on your teams, so that you're really aware and you're hearing directly from them the kind of challenges that they're facing, the things that are going on, and then empowering your kind of managerial level to make local team decisions that are going to help the people that are working into them.
So you're saying that you can even be purposeful just internally to start with, and not even have any external purpose, that purpose statement that you put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes both ways. I would say the external piece is really important because everyone pretty much has clients or customers. And for the reasons I said before, your clients and customers are now making decisions on who they spend their money with. In a corporate setting, it might be based on kind of ESG criteria. In a consumer setting, it might be, I want to really understand the supply chain here. For example, are people being paid appropriately? Are they in safe environments in which to work? What is the environmental impact of this company? It is going to vary because we have a whole range of businesses and scenarios, but we have to make sure that kind of this purpose strategy and this purpose narrative, how we communicate that internally and externally, is really at the heart of what we're doing. And this comes in at a board level or kind of a leadership level, because it needs to be able to trickle down and for people to know that you mean it as a business, because that authenticity piece is absolutely key.
I love that you can be purposeful internally and use that to communicate externally, like we are the organization who is amazing for parents, for example. So let's go from the micro things that you can do to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So when you and I very first spoke, I said, for lots of organizations, how can they actually get started? And you said the SDGs, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I feel like that's going to blow people's minds. So tell us a little bit more about how the SDGs can actually help people to get started with finding their purpose.
I'm always surprised, but I shouldn't be, because this is my kind of area of focus. But a lot of companies and business owners, my husband included, doesn't know what the SDGs are and what they stand for and what it's all about. Essentially, it's the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are seen as a call to action to transform our world. And within those 17 goals, they cover off everything from poverty to good health, equality, protection of our planet and climate, and really ensuring that all people are able to enjoy healthy lives with prosperity and justice. All of this can mean that they can probably at times sound a bit lofty or vague, or difficult for people to really understand or cling on to. But I see that actually as a creative opportunity, because I think when you look at the 17 goals, it provides a really nice framework by which to kind of identify, okay, of these 17 goals, which is my business naturally aligned with? And I'd be surprised if you couldn't find an authentic connection to at least one of the goals in what you're doing. We talked a bit yesterday, Kat, about how goal 17 is partnership to delivering the goals, partnership to the goals. And I think that one for me is often the loosest of all, but it also, again, as I said, for me, it feels like there's an opportunity. This idea around collaboration over competition, the kind of capitalist model by which we all live and work is really kind of losing steam and approval with Gen Zers. We're seeing some statistics come out. I just want to check my notes to get this right. Like 80% of British Gen Zers blame capitalism for the majority of societal issues that we're currently facing, whether that's housing, climate, or the economy. And in the US, which we kind of think of, the capitalist nation, 45% of young Americans favor capitalism today, and that's down from 68%, 8 years ago. And so it's increasingly important. If people are turned off by capitalism, what are they turned on by? And we know it's purpose. It's like societal gain for everyone, equality, all of the things that you and I work towards. And so to the original point, I think if your business isn't embedded with one of the goals or more, then it can be a really good starting point. I did some impact manifesto work with an SME up in Edinburgh last year. And that business owner came to me saying, look, we're doing really, really well. We're a production company. And I think about sustainability in terms of how we produce our filmed and audio content, but I'd love to do more. Can you help me understand ways that make sense for us to make a bit more of a purposeful contribution? So one of the solutions that we came up with was that she would offer an internship for local young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods in Edinburgh to go and work with her and kind of really understand how the film and production industry works. So there's so many different ways that this can translate and manifest into real tangible solutions that impact people positively.
Yep, exactly. I really love the fact that you think of sustainable development goals and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to bring that about myself. I am very much to take it on my shoulders and feel like I have the weight of the world. But actually, if you reframe that mindset to looking at them as a blank canvas with loads of room for interpretation underneath them. And also, I really love that you said, look at which one you're naturally aligned to. That's the way on our global citizenship section in the EDI health check, we say to people, look at what your employees already say that you're doing really well and just build that out, like really focus on it, especially if it's an accident, especially if you've not been purposeful about it. Look at it, be purposeful about it, and you'll probably make massive gains, just getting this thing and thinking, if we were going to go external with this thing, what would we need to do in order to make sure that we really could stand by what we're saying here? Brilliant. I love that. And did you want to touch on brand partnerships? Because yesterday you talked about some like amazing brand partnerships and you came up with some examples that I hadn't heard of before.
Yeah, so back to that point around collaboration over competition, traditionally we would kind of see somebody who's operating in the same space as us as a threat, but increasingly I'm starting to see more and more businesses identifying aligned brands that they can partner with. This also chimes with companies not necessarily wanting to spend all of their marketing pounds, dollars with the likes of Google or Meta on digital ads. So again, we're starting to see some really creative and impactful approaches around that. I've got two examples. Yoto Player, if there's anybody here who's got young children in their lives, might be familiar with Yoto Player. It's an audio device that kind of sits in your my dog's coming. Sorry. It's an audio device that you can load with content on different cards, everything from kind of storytelling to history, to lullabies. They do podcasts. It's great. And parents love it because it's no screen time. They did a very recent collaboration with Merlin, who are the company responsible for a lot of our big attractions like Alton Towers and London Dungeons and SeaWorld. So their brand collaboration there is Yoto times SeaWorld. and they've created some additional content that you can only access via the Yoto player. It means that there's marketing and visibility both brands are generating, so they're adding value for each other, but they're also delivering additional value to their consumer, because I'm like getting interesting content I wouldn't otherwise have, and it's kind of opening up that consumer experience. The other example I wanted to give is with a women's well-being brand called Clementine. It's a digital app which really helps, based in hypnotherapy and mindset. They did a collaboration with Boots number 7 last year. Boots number 7 were launching a new menopause range of tangible products, supplements, skin creams, etc. And Clementine created a bespoke suite of materials on their digital platform, speaking to support menopausal women. So you would go into the store, you'd see the display, you'd see the products, you'd see the QR code for Clementine. Brilliant. Like, I'm really excited as we see more and more of these kind of tie-ups, because like I said, they're really resourceful in that they're not looking for brands to reinvent the wheel or kind of duplicate efforts. It's very much rooted in, we have a shared audience, we can provide value to each other and to our audience. What is the best way for us actually to deliver that and bring that to life?
Collaboration over competition, absolutely, that is one of our core values as a company. And actually those examples you gave were enormous everyday household brands, but also on the teeny tiny micro example, it's kind of what you and I are doing right now. That's exactly what we're doing. So you could do it on the small scale and on the big scale. You know, SMEs, there's loads of local business stuff that I go to, and local knowledge sharing, and you can stand up and talk to each other and do that knowledge share and find like-minded businesses who share your values and go in together on something to do with, you know, whichever of those sustainable goals is speaking to you, or wherever your values lie. One thing I wanted to touch on is the overwhelm issue. So I work with a lot of HR directors, and most of this, let's be honest, most of this, even though it should be from, you know, CEO downwards, most of this lands predominantly on the HR director's desk and the team of the HR. There's a lot of pressure to focus on EDI, on engagement, on culture, on sustainability. And now there's this whole pressure about purpose. How do you advise the organizations that you work with on how to tackle this feeling of overwhelm, of like, oh my gosh, what do we do next?
I mean, it's like with all things, you need to prioritize, don't you? And I mean, I would say this, but I really believe that this purpose piece needs to be one of the top priorities, because of all the reasons that we've already explained. You know, people choosing where they want to work or leaving if it's not aligning with them, customers and clients deciding who they're buying from based on this. We kind of need to, if we haven't done it already, we need to nail this purpose piece. And it actually is integral because it falls into everything else. I mean, purpose, the purpose narrative, if you like, brand narrative, often sits with marketing, corporate affairs, branding teams, depending on how you're structured. But they do work very, very closely with EDI, with HR, talent, people teams, because of that interaction between your external brand and your internal brand. And you kind of have to be living the truth of both at all times. This purpose work I'm finding with my more recent clients is really driving revised, renewed employee value propositions. Is kind of very much seen as their brand differentiator when they're thinking, how do we attract that talent? How do we make sure that women at executive levels aren't leaving us? I mean, there's a study by Deloitte, I want to say, that came out recently saying 70% of women at kind of middle and senior management levels are getting ready to leave their jobs in the next 18 months, whether they have something to go to or not. And it's not because of money. That's the key thing. I think that's the main kind of message really that's through this whole conversation, Kat. The kind of the old paradigm of it being around kind of companies making money and companies paying their staff money and that being enough has shifted. And so that being the case, we've got to invest time, resources, experience, talent into getting the purpose narrative and the foundations of your purpose piece absolutely right.
through your explanation, you've pretty much just summarized that actually purpose, EDI, culture, engagement, sustainability, whatever else, all ladders into that. So, this could be the North Star, or purpose could be the North Star, and everything else will hopefully fall into place once you've got that statement, as you said, sorted. So let's go back to purpose statements. So that I have never worked for an organization, I don't think, who've had a purpose statement until I work for Powered by Diversity, which obviously we do. What is a purpose statement, and who in an organization should be in charge of creating one? How do they get created? How do you work with organizations to really nail down a purpose statement?
It's definitely become part of the work I've been doing with clients, part of that brand narrative, that brand positioning. So I'm sure everyone's kind of been privy to discussions or workshops around vision, mission, values. And I know for some people, they can find those really frustrating or even confusing. What's the difference between a vision statement and a mission statement? And somewhere along the line in the last kind of 5 years or so, purpose has definitely kind of come into that space, and it's really much is the top tier, if you will. And as I said, it is about that North Star. It's your reason for being beyond profit, what we talked about before. And if you have a mission statement, a vision statement, your values, whatever. And by the way, I do a lot of work with clients where we don't use those phrases on purpose. We'll develop the statements, the beliefs, the things that we want to achieve, we want the world to know about us as a brand, but we might not necessarily call it a vision statement. But it's really important because this is a fundamental key pillar to your brand story. And every business has a brand, whether you think you do or not. And importantly, brands don't decide what they are. People outside and internally decide. They tell you what you are based on how you behave, based on how you make people feel, based on the impact, positive or negative, you're having in the world. Reputation, of course, is a key part of this. So to your question, where does this sit? It does tend to be led by comms marketing teams. And on a board level, we kind of sit under that CMO role, but working really, really closely with people teams. And those are the kind of cohorts that feed into that too.
You could greenwash, you can talk performative, anything you want out there, but actually, if you're not walking your talk, look at Twitter, the Twitter bot and the gender pay gap stuff that happens. If you're not walking the talk, people will know straight away. So you don't get to decide your brand.
It's that phrase, Cass, of people won't remember necessarily what you said or buy into what you say. They always remember how you make them feel. And it's the same for businesses.
Maya Angelou, that is one of my favorite quotes in the whole world. I love that. On this topic then, let's talk about racial justice. So how does racial justice tie into purpose or impact?
Because it's all about people. It all comes back to the people and planet. And so when you are committed to racial justice, you're being purposeful. It's a really key component of that. And it, of course, aligns with the values of DEI, an authentic commitment to racial justice. So this is demonstrated by the diverse teams that you're hiring, how you're behaving, say, if you're working in other parts of the world that, are global majority populations, how are you behaving when you're in those environments? All of these different things and how you behave and the policies that you have and the narrative that you are telling around racial justice is absolutely key, because it helps recruit and retain diverse talent to begin with. It helps foster inclusive workspaces. It builds stronger relationships with both the people that want to come and work with you and hopefully stay with you, but also those clients and customers who, again, are seeing this as another thing by which they're deciding how they're going to interact with you, if at all.
And not to go too deep into it, but we work with a lot of organizations who do not have a lot of racial or ethnic diversity in their organizations. But that shouldn't preclude you from being committed to racial justice, should it? Like, you can still be an anti-racist organization while still working on the diversity, ethnically of your employees, right?
Definitely. And it's really important to think kind of wider around this. So for example, somebody who's very close to me, who might live in this house, has a business that works in an industry that traditionally does not attract Black or brown talent. And in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder and the reemergence of Black Lives Matters, this became a bit of a topic, between me and him and his business partner and his business partner's wife. Why don't you have any people of color working in your business? And their response was, well, we just don't have many people in the industry. I was like, okay, that's not enough. That's not the end. If that is the case, then how do you start working with universities? How do you start as purposeful business leaders working with schools to offer internships so that you're getting diverse kids, school kids, coming into your office, seeing the work you're doing and seeing, what's possible? But this is even a possibility. And so it's things like that that are really important. It can't just be, well, people don't want to work in this, or we don't get applications from people from those groups. Okay, why? That's just, we don't get applications isn't the end of the conversation or the solution. It's like, why? And what can we do to make sure that we do start getting more applications? We do start having kids studying these appropriate degrees. We do get people who are interested in what we're doing.
It takes bravery to do that, asking the question why, seriously asking the question why. So let's talk about something else that requires bravery, which is language and keeping up with the zeitgeist of the language around purpose or impact. A lot of language has changed, so it's not the third world anymore, it's the developing world. It's not minoritized groups anymore, it's increasingly being referred to as global majorities. How can people, what's in, what's out, how can people keep up with the language of purpose?
I mean, we spoke about this yesterday, and I admitted to you my own vulnerability of, like, sometimes I can be scared of saying the wrong thing or using the wrong language. And as you said, Kat, the language is evolving from a societal level rapidly. It feels like it's changing much more than, say, when I was a child. And think about some of the things, the faux pas my parents would say, or the inappropriate things my parents or grandparents would say. And so that can feel really intimidating to people, particularly in a work setting where you don't want to offend or you don't want to get it wrong. But what that can often result in is people saying nothing or kind of shying away from it. And I think you and I were kind of discussing this. The solution around that is diverse teams, hiring for diversity to begin with, but creating environments by which, if you don't know how you want to refer to someone or something, knowing that you have somewhere you can go to within your business structure to get that answer. So whether it's an in-house resource, whether it's a consultancy that you're hiring, I believe really strongly that it's business owners, it's business leadership's responsibility to ensure that you have that expertise in place so that your staff know that they can go to someone and get the answer. And importantly, not lay the burden, if we're talking about racial justice, for example, on your Black employees. They shouldn't be having to do their normal job and then on top of having to kind of explain racial justice to their non-Black colleagues. And so it's really important that we're seeing both kind of energy, resources, budget put into having the right expertise in place so that your employees can seek that out as and when they need it.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about a very easy trap that we have very publicly seen a lot of organizations fall into on social media, and that is tick-boxing, performatism, greenwashing, however you want to refer to it. Essentially, it's incongruence, isn't it? It's just putting something out there in order to look good when you're maybe not walking the talk internally. So, but it is an easy trap to fall into. People with the best intentions can go out there and say something and people will take it one way. How can organizations not fall into the trap of appearing tick-boxy?
It's a combination of the things we've just been talking about. It comes back to being authentic. Authenticity in your actions is absolutely key, because we know people can see straight through it and then you lose trust. It's around being curious, as I said, and in business that can also turn into doing the research, hiring organizations like yours, Kat, to do the research, do the testing. I was mentioning to you yesterday, I'm part of an organization called the Diversity Standards Council, and they do a lot of work with the advertising agency on behalf of the brands those advertising agencies are producing creative campaigns for. And I've worked on a couple of kind of focus groups or workshops where we will look at a campaign and from our lived experience. So from my lived experience as a brown mixed race woman living in the UK, how am I interpreting this piece of creative? What am I noticing that other people with a different lived experience might not notice? Is there anything that's prejudice in here? Is there anything that's insulting? And so it's, again, depending on who your audience is and what your objectives are, you can't have, to use the advertising agency, which I love and have done a lot of work with in the past, that's another predominantly white, Oxbridge educated industry. And yet they're responsible for mass communications. How easy is that to get things wrong if you're not working, speaking in dialogue with the audiences you're trying to reach? Because it would be incredibly easy to get it wrong and disengage and lose the trust of those audiences in one fell swoop.
So what, not everyone's got massive budgets sloshing around to be able to do this stuff. What can you do on a budget? Quick wins, easy fixes. Give us everything you got.
Well, I'll give you a few ideas. One of the things that we were talking about before was about volunteering. Now, kind of allowing time for your staff to support volunteering in whatever way is not a new thing, but generally, traditionally, it's kind of been things like going to paint a school or going to clean up a garden or whatever it might be. And I think this comes back to ask your staff or see what makes sense in terms of your own company's purpose statement, and allow for some flexibility and creativity around how those volunteer hours are spent. It doesn't have to be, the traditional way of doing things. There's a brilliant platform called Matchable that I have used, and maybe some of you have heard of it, but Matchable will match corporate employees who have maybe 1 to 2 days volunteering to use with impact focused organizations. So that might be a charity, it might be a social enterprise, it could be a for-profit, but that has impact at its heart. And you put up projects, you put up briefs, and you basically get matched with someone who can help you. So you could be a new charity and you want some help developing a social media strategy, and this person over here is part of a marketing team in a corporate, you get matched with them, all kinds of things. So I love that, and I love that there are more opportunities. I will labour the point of volunteering a little bit further, because it's also important to note that the impact on volunteering, studies show, is often far greater on the person who is volunteering than the person that they're being in service to. I am involved with a London homelessness charity called Under One Sky, and we commissioned some research around this, particularly off of the back of our emergency activities during the pandemic. And what we found was across the board that the impact of being of service, of going out and seeing people, delivering sandwiches, having conversations, had such a it just meant so much to the individuals who were volunteering in ways that they would never have thought of before that. And you then think, well, if my company's allowing me to do this, you get some feel-good feelings about that. Of course you do. So volunteering is not to be underestimated in the power that it can have. I think it's really important. I'm a storyteller, and I strongly believe in the power of storytelling. And I think we need to find opportunities for the people who have been impacted by the good work that you're doing, tell those stories. That thing we were saying about how your brand and your reputation, it's not what you tell or say, it's what other people do. And so, giving a platform to, or creating space for some of your stakeholders or your constituents or whoever they might be, to tell your stories, to tell the stories on your behalf, is really, really powerful. Use social media for this as well, kind of behind the scenes. I think it's Waitrose that's done a brilliant job on TikTok of allowing their staff to create their own videos, and I've seen some really funny ones of different shelf displays or dance routines, and look, it can seem frivolous, but actually it's really kind of on brand for Waitrose. Waitrose is about food, it's about family, it's about all of that stuff. It's a day-to-day thing, and the people we counter in Waitrose are day-to-day people. So let them shine, let them see us, let us see them having fun at work. So there's some really lovely ways that you can do that too. And importantly, document what you're doing on a purpose basis. Ideally, you'd have a social impact report that you're putting together every year, putting together a strategy in the first place so that we can come back and measure what success has looked like, have we met our objectives and our goals. So yeah, there's those are a few kind of low cost approaches that can really start help on the purpose activities. People buy people. You know, when I think about some of the PR work I do, we're always looking, where's the human story? Where's the human interest piece? Where's the angle? I did some work for a science-based company last year who were heavily involved in the vaccines around COVID and did some really, really amazing work. But because of how they were, you know, situated in their focus, they're scientists. So they're focusing on the science. I'm like, okay, this is amazing what you've done, but we need, where are the people in this? We need to tell some stories around how this work you have done, which absolutely is scientific and innovative and all of that great stuff. How do we translate that into a human story? How is this impacting people? Because we relate to each other. So I would say with a lot of businesses, particularly smaller businesses, people are buying into the founder more than the brand. You know how sometimes you can look on social media like, oh, the brand has got 2,000 followers and yet the founder has got 100,000 followers. Is because we buy into each other as human beings and we're always looking for ways that we can relate to one another. And businesses, you know, successful businesses recognize that and they do that kind of human storytelling really, really well.
One of the things that popped into my head actually as you were talking before about resources and volunteering and things you could do was that, yes, I have just said that one of the organizations I worked with had a newsroom. They're a media company, and one of the things that they did, which was related to their core thing, was that to let us all go out and volunteer reading with kids in school, in local schools. So we all went out and spent some time with kids. Those with DBS checks could obviously spend time alone, if not with a teacher in a group. And it was immensely fulfilling. Everybody who volunteered on that project absolutely loved it, to see these little kids who you had the same one every week and you really see them developing in their reading. Even something as small as that is purposeful, right? You know, it doesn't have to cost anything at all, actually, because if you approach a local school, they'll probably bite your arm off for things, you know, whether it's talks or skills workshops or reading, you know, whatever that is. Local schools can be a great and affordable way of starting to be more purposeful.
Of course, it comes back to community, doesn't it? And communities are a really big part of this purpose piece. So as the school example is brilliant, but it's almost like if we think about that on a personal micro level, I live in a very kind of close, active road. Like we have a WhatsApp group that's, you know, off the charts with stuff going on. But I love that, you know, I can kind of call in a neighbour to babysit my child, or you might think, no, oh, a baby's been born down the road, let me just drop something to eat. And like, it's kind of old school, but the pandemic showed us these are the kinds of connections people, human beings, are absolutely craving. And so it's kind of thinking about, on a personal level, how do we purposefully behave amongst our kind of the communities where we live, and then also taking that kind of thinking into, okay, how does this translate at work? How can we support our local communities or our, you know, regional communities, whatever it might be, in ways that make sense for us and feels authentic and true?
What is the one thing never to do in pursuit of purposefulness?
I think this comes back to knowing what your North Star is around purpose, having absolute clarity around that so that you never work against it. When you have that clarity, you're able to check back. Does this fit? Is this what we want to be doing? Is this what we're known for? And it's that, I think Dolly Parton, I want to say, had that phrase of like, find out who you are so that then you can do it on purpose. And it's very much that, you know, I'm probably paraphrasing Dolly, but it's imperative that you know who you are as a business, you know what you stand for, you know what your purpose North Star is, so that you can do it again and again and again, and people can see that and they can trust it and that they can really buy into it.
Brilliant. I love that. And also that goes for people on the individual level too, right? You know, when you're thinking about authenticity, get to know who you are so you can do it on purpose. Love it. Let's break the mold. Okay, so I think the perfect point to end on is one thing that everybody could do right now. So what can everybody who's taken this time leave, go back into the office and get to work on right away?
Yeah. Well, it's investing in purpose, and that doesn't always necessarily mean money, but it is actually taking those steps so that you're moving towards your purposeful objectives. So low cost, we already spoke about today, volunteering, empowering teams to volunteer, make sure they're using that allocation and doing it in ways that are meaningful to them on an individual level, and also part of the wider brand story. You told me this phrase yesterday, Kat, nothing about us without us. So this really strong sense of inclusivity, ensuring that as business leaders, you're giving voice, you're giving platforms, you're giving agency to the audiences that you're engaging with who have lived experience that is very unique to them, making sure that those voices have an opportunity to be heard and also considered. And around that, it comes back to my earlier point of making sure you've got the right expertise in place to support that, whether it's in-house or externally, but making sure that you know, if it's around neurodivergency, you've got neurodivergent voices. If it's around racial justice, you've got non-white voices, and giving them that sense of empowerment, and authentically doing so that everybody feels valued and seen.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. As always, you have been amazing. To our audience, if you'd like to be in touch with Rebecca, if you have any questions, if you'd like to explore working with her, please do so. Her LinkedIn is in the chat. So for now, have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, everybody. And I'll see you soon.